Oh
So
my
it's going
god.
to be just a conversation, right? About,
Yeah.
because you were saying just before I hit record, this is the first time you've ever done anything like this. So it's,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really interesting for our community to kind of put a face behind the name of, you know, whoever's behind some of
The sounds.
the lesser
Yeah.
known stuff of Explain 12, which is going to be cool. So thank you for
Yeah.
joining me today.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, really.
Well, I am very excited because, so for me, flight simulation is very much about the immersion, and I feel like one of the more immersive aspects is sound design, which is
Yeah.
kind of your expertise. So we're going to talk all about sound design in this Explain 12 episode. We've had a series of these already produced. We've spoken to Austin about the weather and flight dynamics. We've spoken to
Yeah.
Ben about the graphics, Thompson about some of the other stuff going on, and we've got a whole series of stuff. But now the attention is all on sound design.
On
So
sound.
before we kind of talk about that, I'd love to learn a little bit more about yourself, and what got you into sound design in the first place.
It's a tricky question. Music and sound has been there all my life. When I was little, my parents had this huge box of records, vinyl records, and a turntable, which I spent the afternoons playing with it, listening. And so, yeah, music and sound has always been a part of my life. But it's always been an experimental thing. Um, when I graduated from high school, I got my first PC, my first own PC, and you may be too young to remember this, but computers didn't used to do sound. PCs didn't used to do sound, so you had to buy a sound card for that. So I bought the Sound Blaster Pro in that time, and started doing experiments with that, and it was amazing. You can do all sorts of stuff you could never imagine a PC could do. So I started making music and playing with samplers and stuff. I also was a DJ for a short period of time, a couple of years, with some friends, and that kind of, yeah. I was always interested in this, but it never worked formally as a sound designer. I used to, well, aviation is my passion. So when when FSX came out, and I tried to do some sounds for planes in FSX. So yeah, I had some published there, and when I left flight simulation for a period of time, and when I came back to simulation, I came back with Explain 10. And as you probably remember, the sound aspect on Explain 10 was uh, less than ideal. So yeah, so when Explain 11 was announced, and it was about to include the Fmod technology, it was it awoke my interest. Um, I had bought the 737 from Flyjet Sim at the time, and when I tried on Explain 11, I didn't quite like the sounds it had. So I started to see, okay, maybe this is time to start learning Fmod and apply my knowledge and try to do sounds for Explain. Let's try and see how it goes. It was something for me. uh, I wanted to have a good sounds for the 737-200, because that plane has been all my childhood. I've lived in a small town that is 3,000 kilometers from here, from Buenos Aires, and um, so that airplane was an important part of my life, and I remember exactly how it sounded on the inside and the outside. So I even had recordings, from old recordings I had on VHS tapes. So I started to do those sounds for me, and I put those sounds on a YouTube video, that work in progress sound. And then suddenly people started calling me and, hey, do you want to make sounds for our airplanes? The guys at Aerobask were the first one I started to work with, Lionel and Stefan, and they trusted me with their fleet. We started with one airplane, which was the twin velocity between, and with what I learned so far on Fmod, I started doing sounds for them, and that came out right. They liked the sounds. People liked the sounds, and so I started doing almost their entire fleet. And that's when Jack from Flight contacted me and said, "Hey, I saw you work on Airbus and the work you did on the 737, and I'm going to publish an updated version of the 737-200, and I want your sounds there." So for me was, oh my god, this is this is awesome. So yeah, and the sounds I've made for the 737 were just a bit of the engines and a couple of switches and nothing more. So uh, when I started working for Flight Sim, I had to complete the whole soundscape of the aircraft, and I learned a lot on the process, and it was a great experience, and the sounds uh, were uh, were very positively received by well, the developer Jack loved them, but by the community too. I watched the streams when the aircraft came out, and I saw people uh, uh, um, amazed by the sounds. And yeah, I thought, okay, maybe I have something I could exploit here. I could do this. I don't know if for a living, but I could do this on a regular basis. So I started doing it. And when Laminar, I was a bit disappointed with Explain 11 Soundscape, because at the time the technology was there, but it was not implemented, but only on two planes. The only two planes on Explain 11 that came with sounds were the Cessna and the Baron at the time of release. So when the people at Laminar published a listing asking for developers, I I told them I do sounds. Look at my sounds, and I I nagged them so hard that Chris Sirio finally okay. I have the King Air, which is half finished. Let's try and work on that. Let's see how it works, and that came out great too. And I finished the King Air. They liked it, and so they started hiring me in a more permanent capacity. So that's how I starting working for Laminar. So um, then I did the 737, and gradually the rest of the fleet. Not all planes in X-Line 11 were launched with sounds, but they will on Explain 12. So that's my history, condensed it.
Wow. I mean, so I knew you did work previously for FlyJSim and Aerobask, and obviously your work within Explain as well. But to to see that kind of progress and journey, or to hear about it, is really amazing, really.
Yeah, it was surprising for me too, because I didn't expect it. And the tool itself helped a lot, because Fmod Studio is really easy to use if you came from a sound background. And uh, and something that it took me a week to do in Flight Simulator, because you had to write the values by hand and just draw the curves, and and edit text files and whatever. And it took me less than an hour to try and prototype something on Fmod Studio. So it was uh, it was a really nice experience, learning the tool and discovering the possibilities it has. And it always amazed me. And yeah, I always discover something new, so I go back to old planes and try to update them. Oh, now I know how to do this. And I'm learning constantly. So when you describe me as a sound engineer, I think that the title is too big for me, but this is what I do.
Yeah, you engineer
Yeah,
sounds to make things more authentic. I think
yeah,
it's incredible, really. So you're talking about Fmod. So I
yeah.
imagine there are people watching who, like me, don't really know what Fmod is. Could you explain a little bit more about what that tool is and how you use it to make the sounds for The Sims?
Yeah, Fmod is uh, we have let me try. There's two parts of this. They are the Fmod sound engine, which is the one you integrate into your game or application. That is the one that gives support to the sound. And there is the tool that you use to produce those sounds, which is called Fmod Studio. So on Fmod Studio, you define events which are the sounds you need to hear. If you're, for example, you're doing a shooter, and you could put the fire sound, the step sounds, uh, and then on your game, using the API, using the platform itself, you tell studio, you tell that sound bank you made when to play those events, and where in the 3D world to play those events. So in Explain, the integration is pretty amazing, because um, you just have to put a text file on the airplanes folder, and that text file tells which sound you want based on which conditions on the simulator, and then you design those sounds in Fmod Studio, and that's the way they tie it in.
Wow. Okay. It sounds complicated, but like you say, it's the process itself has been made easier with that
Yeah,
tool compared to what you've
it's
been
pretty
doing before.
easy. It sounds complicated because, well, everything related to programming or software developing is a bit complicated if you're not uh, in the industry. But um, I think that I've seen people on. We have these. Slack space for third-party developers, where the team participates and can resolve questions and stuff. And I've seen people learning Fmod and the tool um, on their own, just by reading the documentation, and it's really pretty easy to use.
Would you say that was how you picked up a lot of your own skills? Was just experimentation and just trying it out and seeing what worked and what didn't?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it was. Yeah, mostly experimentation. Mostly everything I learned in life, I learned by experimentation. Yeah.
I think
Uh,
we all.
yeah. Yeah. I I define myself not as much as a creator, but as a person that likes to reproduce things. Because, for example, I like to do scenery too. For example, I do 3D modeling, basic but 3D modeling. So I did a couple of sceneries for explain, and it's that part of trying to reproduce something that exists in reality and translate it to the flight simulator, and try to get that reality and try and make the people feel like they are in that reality is what drives me. So when I do the airplanes, what I try to capture is that's a sensation you have when you are in the airplane or outside the airplane, and looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, so you talk about the kind of that sensation of being there, and we've spoken a little bit about airplane sounds, and I'll come back to how you record those in just a moment. But I'm interested in talking to you about environmental sounds because that was such a big part of the presentation we saw, kind of, well, a long time ago now at this point, but
Yeah.
how you can be in the forest, for example, and you're hearing like the wind swaying of the trees and the birds and stuff. I mean, whose brainchild was that? Was that your idea to implement, or was it a?
Yeah. Yeah, it was an idea that when I started working for Laminar, it was already floating. It was already a target. But I I myself I added for some airplanes, and that I did for Airbus, for example, or Flight Sim, I added a subtle ambience, because the ambience on X-Lane is completely flat, sterile. Is you If you step out of the airplane, you hear absolutely nothing, and that wasn't realistic. You had an beautiful sounding airplane, and nothing as a background. So I when when I made sounds for airplane, I added at least a bit of background sound. When I when I started working for Laminar, besides doing uh, the sounds for the airplane, I proposed a technology we could use, which was based on the type of scenery you had, and then trying to recreate the sounds without having to put sound emitters in the whole world, because it will be too expensive to, I don't know, add a bird emitter on every tree you had. So we had to come up with some kind of technology that would allow us to create a plausible ambience, and not be too expensive to have to leave some leave CPU and processing power for the sounds of the airplanes, which are more important. But the ambience is important, so we started working on that, and it came out. I think it came out pretty nicely. Um, we had ambience for different types of land, when you're in a forest, when you're in a rural ambience, when you're in an airport, in an airport that is big or small, sounds different. If you are on near the parking spots, or you are near the runway, or you can hear different sounds, and I think it contributes to the immersion, especially with some airplanes that has their own um, bubble of their own a very specific, very thick ambience. For example, the the glider. The glider is like a fiberglass bathtub, and when you're inside that, you can imagine what it will sound like. You will hear every sound uh, bouncing on the structure of the fiberglass around you. And if you look recordings on YouTube, you will see that that is the case. But as soon as you open the canopy, uh, the that ambience disappears, dissipates. You stop hearing those reflections, and start hearing the birds around you, the sounds of the nature. And for that transition to be, you need both parts. You need the aircraft sounds, and you need the exterior ambience, and the exterior ambience has to match what you see. So yeah, that is what we were trying to accomplish with the soundscape on Explain 12.
That's really cool. I mean, like when I watched that presentation, that really struck, and everyone's like, "Oh, the planes and the weather and stuff," but sound for me is one of the most important elements. So it's really cool to see you're implementing this kind of life into X-Plane. Because yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
it
You
can
step
take
out of an
you.
airport, and this airports are loud and noisy, and they're full of hustle and bustle. So it's good to hear some of that
Yeah,
ambience.
and it's very enjoyable on their own. I when I made the sounds for the aerolite, which is that small ultralight which has this um, these wings that are made of fabric. A- and I was trying the. Oh, sorry, you can hear that dog outside.
Yeah, but he's fine.
Okay, um,
It's
when I
just
was
ambience.
yeah, The ambience here, I need to move ASAP. So when I was doing the rain hitting the aircraft, um, I suddenly just stayed. I put the VR glasses and just stay seated, listening the drops falling on the. It came to a point that I discovered that I have it tuned perfectly, so it sounded like, yeah, raindrops are hitting the fabric of the wings. So I just stood there hearing the rain fall. And it's so cool. Yeah, I love doing that.
That's really awesome. Well, thank you
Yeah,
for sharing that. It's like I said, it's really cool to hear how kind of ideas go from that as an idea and actually how you implement it.
yeah,
And kind of speaking of implementation, I've always been very curious as to how anyone records sounds for aircraft or anything really. So, can you tell us what the process is for recording for any particular aircraft and how it goes from the recording to being something we hear in a sim?
yeah. That depends very much on the airplane, the type of airplane, the type of engines the airplane has. For example, if you were going to record a Cessna, for example, uh, you could go and just stand outside the airplane at a certain distance and record the engine um, running at different RPM regimes. So you stand on the front, you can stand on the side, you can stand on the back, and try and make the engines have someone inside running the engines at 1000 rpm, 1500 500 rpm, etc., etc. So you get all these recordings, and then you will grab those and try to come up with sound loops that allows you to have an infinite running of that RPM, and then you interpolate those recordings. You interpolate on Fmod Studio, um, and you define that you want this sound to to play when the engine on X-Plane is 100 RPM, 1000 RPM, etc., etc. And uh, and you can fade one sound into another, so you get a smooth transition as you go from low RPM to high RPM, and there you and then you could add different tracks. You had a track with the sound from the front, a track from with the sound from the side, a track with the sounds from the rear of the airplane, and fade those based on the direction you are facing the sound. Because that is a parameter you get from Xplane. Xplane will tell Fmod Studio where the where the listener is standing with regards to with relationship in re, yeah, in relation to the sound source. So as you move around, you will get this fading from one set of recording to another, right? That is for a prop type of airplane where the engine and the prop are kind of inseparable, and it kind of always sounds the same, and it's the easiest type of sound, of airplane sound to make. But you then have yeah, you then have the jet engines, and the jet engines are more complicated because they are made of different stages. You have the fan, the fan on the front, and then you have the compressor on the back of the engine. The fan takes the air, compresses it, enters the compressor, ignites, and comes out on the back. The guys when they hear that interview will laugh, because that's not how engines work, but that is how I understand engines work. And so you have different things that are not always in sync. For example, the starter of a jet engine operates on the compressor. It's a small motor, or yeah, it's like a small motor that is coupled to that stage and makes it spin, and then fuel is introduced, combustion starts, and that is sucking air, so the N1 with the first stage starts to spin. So they go separately. So if you, for example, you abort the start, N1 maybe never rotates, so it doesn't make sound, but N2 will make sound. So for that to work in in every part of the simulation, you have to translate that simulation into Fmod Studio. You have to try and recreate the sound of the different parts of the engine. So you have sounds for the first stage, for N2, for N1, for N2 the compressor, for the combustion sound, for the gearing of the starter. You have this different sound, and you layer them. And in that case is difficult to do with recordings, but because with recordings you get the entire cake, and you're trying to separate the eggs from the flour, right? It's kind of impossible. So you have to use the recordings as a reference instead of using them directly on FL Studio. So I used the recordings as reference to know which frequencies uh, which frequencies are N2 and which other frequencies are N1, and try to separate them and model them, and try to come up with a reproduction that sounds as close to the original as possible, and that will follow the simulation accurately. If you cut the starter, you never hear N1, right? So and if N2 is failing, it will start to spool down, and so you need to do that to have realistic sounds. You could also you could get some different recordings of the engine running at different speeds and be done with it. And yeah, that could work in the majority of the normal situations with the airplane. But you could record the start sequence, but what happens if you abort the start? So you cannot do that with recordings. You have to simulate the engine, and that's what I do. I simulated uh, using synthesizers to try and recreate the sound of the engine.
So when you like obviously grab whether it's a small plane or a big jet, do you have special recording equipment you use to capture this, or do you like outsource it? Like what's that physical process like? Because the
And that depends on the availability of the plane where I live. I live in Buenos Aires, so it's a pretty big city, and There are lots of planes here. I can just grab my recorder and go to the airport and grab reference sounds, especially for jets. For small aircraft, I could go to the small clubs and record directly the aircraft. And but there is no fancy equipment required for this. You only need uh, a recorder and a couple of microphones, and then everything is done in studio, right? That is uh, for the engine sounds. Then you have the other part, which is all the all the small stuff, the foley of the aircraft. And for example, the MD-80. The MD-80 was an it's an aircraft that is kind of military inside. It's it's old. It's yeah, has big chunky livers that make a lot of sound when you move it, and to open the windshield from the pilot. You can hear that? No? Okay. No, it's a loudspeaker. Um, yeah, there is a guy that goes street by street shouting, "We buy old furniture. We buy." Yeah,
You
it's
should record it and then put that as an Easter egg within Argentina.
within Argentina. Yeah, compramos colchones viejos. Um, yeah, I will start again with the MD-80. With the MD-80, you have all this stuff that sounds chunky, that it's very characteristic of the airplane. So I I went to the museum here, the National Aeronautic Museum, Museo Aeronáutico Nacional. They kindly gave me permission to go into their MD-80. They had an MD-80 that is in pristine state, and I had I had like 3 hours inside that plane to record everything, every single switch and every single uh, lever, and it was amazing because when you apply that to the simulation, you can really feel you are there. You can actually feel what it's made of, right? And that is the other fun part of doing the sounds for airplanes. One part is the engines, which are very important because it's the characteristic sound of the airplane from the outside and the inside. But then you have a lot of stuff on the inside that makes noise too. And if it's animated on the simulator, you need to have sound. Take for example the Q400 of Flight Sim. Q400 had a lot of animation. Even the overhead bins open, and I had a recording of overhead bins, so I used that, and it came out great
Yeah,
because
no,
it's
I
the
love
real.
that type of stuff. Yeah,
Sorry,
that's really cool. I was saying I really liked the sound effects of doing that because I used to work on the airlines myself. So hearing the lockers and stuff,
the
you know,
leggers, yeah,
brought me back to that. So that was really
and
cool
the
to hear.
tri tables and the folding tables. Yeah,
All you were missing was kind of the baby screaming in the corner and people
yeah,
getting kicked on the back of the seats. Then that would have been the
yeah.
authentic experience.
And that is always a discussion because you cannot see the people. So why did you have sound of people if there is no people? So yeah, this is always a discussion. Well, for ambience, but yeah, but you cannot. If you go to the cabin, the seats are empty. So this is an empty airplane. The people, there are no people. There are ghosts. Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Um, wow, I've learned loads about sound design and kind of your process. Do you have like obviously, I guess the 737 has a very special place in your heart as that's kind of that
Yeah.
personal project. Do you have any favorite projects you've worked on, or sound effects, or stories you want to tell us?
Oh, yeah. Every plane that I do is my favorite at the time I am doing it, because yeah, because I am learning, which each one I'm learning something new. So uh, I I I used to get very involved in the development of sound for an airplane. So I try to research as much as I can, and if I have access to a real thing, I try to go and visit and hear and touch and get the feel of the airplane. And so every plane I did is my favorite. I love them all. I love all of them. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't have a particular favorite. No, I always have a special place for the 737, both the 737 2000, which is which sounds so characteristic with the cigar engines, and the 737 8000 because it's just a beautiful plane. And yeah, and Alex did a so beautiful work modeling it, and when you see that on VR, you feel like you are inside. Have you tried VR? Have you tried sound on VR? It's another thing. It transports you into the airplane. It's amazing. For the 737, for example, I had help from a friend that works in a local airline, the national airline. Uh, my friend is name is Christian, and he helped me record a lot of the sounds of the airplane because he's a mechanic. So, and he was my number one critic when I was developing. No, that sounds a bit, that is not exactly. Yeah, you cannot hear that sound from the cabin. Yeah, so he told me, he taught me a lot of stuff about the 737, which I implemented on the product, and I think it came out right. So yeah, that has a special place in my heart.
I bet. And I guess with sound design, I imagine you've also had feedback from people who are flying the sim but are maybe usually sat in the cabin where it sounds very different at the back of the
Mm,
plane to the front of the plane, and they're saying, "Oh,
yeah.
that doesn't sound right." So you must get that sort of feedback as well quite a
Yeah,
lot.
you have feedback for everyone, and often you have complaints that someone that is used to fly in the cabin, but he doesn't know how it sounds on the cockpit, and then they say, "Hey, why don't you hear the flaps on the cockpit?" No, you don't hear the flaps on the cockpit. No, you don't. Why is the wind so loud in the cockpit? It is loud. You have the giant
Windows.
shiny windscreens. Yeah, so it sounds loud, and yeah, you have feedback from people who knows, and that people who doesn't know how it sounds like, and you have to try and please everyone. So you put a faint sound so they notice that it's there. So yeah, you have to strike a balance between realism and dramatism, right?
Yeah,
You people need a little drama. Yeah, if I move this, I want to hear something, and that is, and there is always the people that have a lot of hours on the plane, and those are the most difficult to please because they know exactly how they sound on every phase of the flight, and they they will know if something is out of place. There was there's this funny thing about the the f- uh, the Q400. of legacy. Um, we have been told that the the sound of the windshield, the windshield, yeah, the windshield, right? What you have in front, yeah, the windshield. The sound of the windshield is so loud that they discovered that if the pilot puts the wipers in the vertical position, the sound gets a little softer. So I try to find references of that and I model that. And we didn't put it anywhere. Just I modeled that, and I don't know if I can remember if I ever told Jack that was implemented. And then I saw a stream of a pilot that was testing the Q400, and he said, "Yeah, we used to. Yeah, the sound on the copy is very loud because of the wind. We used to do this to attenuate the sound." And then he tries, and it's surprised that it worked. So yeah, those kind of things are so cool when you get them right, because it surprised the people that are experienced with the plane. They're the ones who appreciate that the most, right?
And this is why I think sound is one of the most immersive elements of any
Yeah,
medium, to be honest with
yeah,
you, because those small things make a massive
yeah,
difference.
yeah.
So we've talked a lot about how you develop Fmod or use Fmod to develop these sound creations. What about aspiring sound developers? What advice would you give to anyone who's watching this thinking, yeah, I'd like to follow in your footsteps and make a cool sound pack for an airplane I love?
My only advice will be just do it. Just get an airplane you love. That is important. Get an airplane you love, you want to get right, and try and follow. You only need to read the documentation, and you learn Fmod first. Do things in Fmod Studio. Try to understand how Fmod Studio works first. Then go to Explain and try to integrate that with Explain. You need to know how to use Fmod Studio first before you go to Explain. But just do it. Go. It's free to experiment. It's completely free. So you just download the software and try and do something. Um, I don't know what other advice I could give. That is exactly what I did. I just
Well,
did it.
yeah, and look where you are today. You took that kind of passion and you've managed to turn it into something you do very regularly now for Laminar Research. I think is awesome. So,
Yeah, I think passion is a very important thing of everything you do. People at Laminar are everyone is so passionate about what they do. I have the lucky to I am lucky to work in a a team of very extremely talented people. There, everyone is passionate about what they do. Uh, you can just see Austin, the head of the company. You can hear it talk for hours about the flight model. So, and everyone in the company is like that. We are passionate for what we do, and I think it's the one of the most important things you can do to make your work reach the heart of what the people that are using it, right?
and I get that sense of passion from we've done a series of these videos now. I've spoken to many members of your team, as have other members of my team spoken to your guys, and every time we come out of these interviews, we're like, God, they could talk for ages about what they're
Yeah.
experiencing, and it, if anything, it makes my life so much easier because I can just ask one or two questions, and then that's kind of the interview done, and
People can
it's
talk for
brilliant.
hours. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I hope that for those who are watching this and they get that sense of passion from you guys at Laminar, because that is kind of why we wanted to do this series of videos, was to see a little bit more about the people behind the code and the airplanes and stuff, and to learn a little bit more about how you got into it. So I think it's like it's been really worthwhile, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the last hour talking to you about sounds.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Well,
It means a lot to me.
I'm really pleased, and I'm pleased this is your first type of interview thing, and hopefully you've not found it too bad.
Thanks. Okay.
No worries. Well, I think we're going to wrap things up there. We've been talking for an hour, but I just want to say thank you ever so much. Honestly, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you and to learn about how you got into this and how you inject your passion into Explain 12. Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to just add?
Uh, I don't know. I don't think so. No, thank you for having me and giving this opportunity to tell people how explain how Laminar works, how explain works, and yeah, we're a small team of passionate people. Try to do the best simulator we can, and yeah, I hope this series of interviews help you transmit that. Right.
Well, thank you
Okay.
very much. And for anyone who's watching, the next time you're in Explain, or when Explain 12 comes out and you're sat there listening to the birds chirping or the sound of the city pass you by, just
That's me.
remember
That's me.
that was, yeah, exactly. So thank you very much. And until the next video, thank you.
Thank you.